The International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, is a global organization dedicated to nature conservation and sustainable resource use. Founded in 1948, it brings together governments, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, scientists, and experts to develop and implement conservation strategies worldwide. Key functions of the IUCN. 1. Biodiversity Conservation works to protect ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity. 2. Sustainable Development promotes responsible natural resource use to balance ecological health and human well-being. 3. IUCN Red List maintains the world's most comprehensive inventory of threatened and endangered species. 4th, Policy Influence advises governments and international bodies like the UN on environmental policies. 5. Protected Areas supports creating and managing national parks and conservation zones. 6. Climate Change Action advocates for nature-based solutions to mitigate climate impacts. 7. Community Engagement encourages local participation in conservation and sustainable livelihoods. As a leading authority on environmental issues, the IUCN plays a vital role in shaping global conservation efforts and ensuring that nature and people thrive together. The IUCN supports the sustainable use of wild species as a key strategy for biodiversity conservation and human well-being. Their position is based on the idea that when wildlife is used sustainably, it can create incentives for conservation while also benefiting local communities that depend on natural resources for their livelihoods. Key aspects of IUCN's position on sustainable use of wild species. 1. Sustainability Principle. The use of wild species must be ecologically sustainable, ensuring that populations and ecosystems remain healthy over time. 2. Human livelihoods and economic benefits. The sustainable use of wildlife can provide economic and social benefits, particularly for indigenous peoples and local communities, IPLCs, who depend on these resources for food, income, and cultural practices. 3. Legal and regulated use. Harvesting, hunting, fishing, and trade of wild species should be well regulated to prevent over-exploitation, illegal trade, and habitat destruction. 4th, scientific and evidence-based management. Decisions on the use of wild species should be guided by scientific research, traditional knowledge, and adaptive management strategies. 5. International agreements and governance. The IUCN works within global frameworks like CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, and CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, to ensure that policies align with global conservation goals. 6. Hunting, fishing, and wildlife trade. When properly managed, sustainable hunting, fishing, and wildlife trade can fund conservation efforts, reduce poaching, and provide alternative livelihoods to communities. 7. Ecosystem-based approach. The IUCN promotes the ecosystem approach, recognizing that species are part of more extensive ecological networks that must be maintained for long-term sustainability. Key IUCN resolutions and reports on sustainable use. The IUCN Sustainable Use and Livelihood Specialist Group works on developing guidelines and best practices for sustainable use. The 2016 IUCN World Conservation Congress reaffirmed the role of sustainable use in conservation through various motions and resolutions. Reports like Assessing the Sustainability of Wild Meat Use in Central Africa highlight the balance between conservation and food security. In conclusion, the IUCN does not oppose the use of wild species, but strongly advocates for responsible, science-based, and regulated use to ensure that it contributes to conservation rather than harming biodiversity.